All right, good morning, folks. We're back with another viewer Q&A. If you have questions for Doug, the best thing to do is join our Telegram group. There's a link in the description of this video. Join our Telegram group. I ask for questions there, and then we get through as many of them as we can during these calls. So, Doug, first off, do you think Bitcoin is the new dot-com bubble of the modern era? There seems to be a lot of hype surrounding cryptos with almost zero practical functionality.
Yeah, the problem is not Bitcoin the way I see it. You know a lot more about the cryptos than I do, Matt, but I'll tell you what I think about it. Bitcoin, I think, is fine. It's a great transfer mechanism. It's an alternative way to hold capital relatively privately and to transfer it. And I think it can go higher. But this isn't going to be a discussion about Bitcoin. And some of these other monetary type cryptos also make sense to me from a theoretical point of view. The problem I have is with these 10,000 so-called shitcoins that I'm not sure what useful purpose they serve. Well, they may. I don't understand it, though. But look, there's still something out there. Is it Shiba Inu coin or is it Doggy coin that have $50 billion market caps?
Something like that.
Okay. A lot of these things are going to turn out to be like the old sardine story. So one time there was a mania in the sardine market. Guy calls his broker and says, listen, I got to get long sardines because either they go a lot higher and I make a fortune, or if they go lower, I'll take delivery and I got a lifetime supply of sardines. Broker says, okay, you're on. So what do you know? The things crash and he has to take delivery of a ton of sardines in his garage. And so he starts eating them. And the things are unedible. They taste like garbage. He calls his broker and says, hey, I can't eat these sardines. And the broker says, well, those weren't eating sardines. Those were trading sardines. So, anyway, that's the joke.
So the cryptos are trading cryptos. That's really what they are. That's what they exist for, is that, you think, more than anything?
I do. And I think that regardless of the many merits of blockchain and the potential for some of these tokens, and I don't know which ones they are. I mean, look, I told you about our friend Marco Wutzer, who in the first quarter, this last quarter that just ended, turned 100 grand into 465 grand trading these things. People can do it. But I think that what's going on and all the newsletters that are out there hyping these things that nobody understands, quite frankly, and saying, oh, and while you hold on to your crypto, you can lend them out and get 25% interest and so forth. I've seen these things.
Yep.
This just tells me there's way, way too much money floating in the system. And of course, the Fed has been creating trillions of currency units over the last few years, as have other central banks, and it's flowed into goofy stuff like this. So it's late in the day. Get out of the water. This can all collapse. In fact, the whole economy, the more I think about it, and maybe it's just that today, commodities in general are weak and down. And I think we're getting really late in the day. These are dangerous times. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Forget about these junk cryptos. Forget about it. Solomon, if you have any. Cancel subscription to your crypto newsletter.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question relates to this. It says uranium and uranium stocks dropped like a turd in a well today. I'm a long-term bull, but what's your take?
Well, I own a bunch of uranium stocks. A few of them are down. My biggest holding is Uranium Royalty and UEC. I think they're okay. But I remain really, really bullish on uranium because there's going to be a real squeeze in fossil fuels, in coal and oil and natural gas. And all of these governments around the world, as stupid as they are are going to go back to nuclear because nuclear is, I'll say it again, just in case anybody doesn't remember, it's the safest and the cheapest and the cleanest form of mass power generation there is. So the market fluctuates, but I wouldn't doubt if we see uranium well above $100 in a mania in these stocks again.
Of course, it could be big. I think one of the things that feels most uncertain to me about the state of the economy and thus the markets right now is the fact that we could be entering a very severe global recession with everything that's going on now, and that demand destruction changes the formula for everything.
You're absolutely right. That certainly could happen. And during the Greater Depression, we're going to see lots of demand destruction. People are going to lose money in the stock markets and the bond markets, and they're going to cut back on consuming frivolous things. And they're not going to have 2 or 3 cars in their garage. They're going to get rid of 2 of them. And the whole thing, it's a daisy chain that's all connected. Yep, all true. Anything could happen and probably will. And it'll all happen this decade. I couldn't possibly be more gloomy and bearish on prospects of everything. But, once again, I'll repeat what Richard Russell said because it's worth repeating maybe every time. It's that during a depression, everybody loses. Winners are just the people that lose the least. There was a time when I thought, well, most of the real wealth in the world is still going to be here. It's just going to change ownership. And that's true too. And you can make a killing. You can make a fortune in a depression. You can be short instead of long. But that is harder to do in fact than it is in theory. So,
well, isn't most of the real wealth will be here, yes, but like most of what people think of as wealth at this point and in our current economy is financialized wealth. So it isn't really real. It really is just air, isn't it? It's just.
Yeah. Well, look at what happened to Netflix. This is the most recent meltdown, and there have been many among these high-flying, no-earning stocks. To what degree is Netflix, which was worth, at the top, $200 billion? I don't even know. It was all funny money. So it's melted down 40% in the last week. So is it really wealth just delivering shows that waste people's time? I don't know. It's not the same as making steel, for instance.
Right.
And a lot of the financialized wealth today is like that. And Twitter. Is Twitter a net contributor to the wealth of society, or is a net destructor of wealth by bringing out the worst in people?
It's hard to argue that any of the new media that over the last 20 years, although it's I have mixed feelings on it because I think media is the problem in many ways, and social media is a big part of it. But you can look at Netflix and the time-wasting entertainment cycle that it produces also is a net negative. But at the same time, there's access to courses and information through YouTube that you can get that really is amazing. And but it does seem like it's a net negative on the whole. It's a net negative.
The things like the courses and the documentaries and so forth, they only constitute, it's got to be much less than 10% of the product.
Oh, I bet you it's 1%, Doug. Most stuff is frivolous entertainment,
The perpetual optimist in me always comes out.
It does. It does. Okay. Let's see. Have you had a chance to look at the work of Eric Weinstein yet? This guy says, seriously, he's for real. Check out his work on geometric unity.
Unfamiliar. Do you know?
Yeah. He's a physicist who worked with Peter Thiel, as I understand it.
Uh-huh.
So I haven't really looked at his work, to be honest, but okay.
Noted.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you recommend a foreign discount brokerage, kind of like Schwab, with no U.S. offices?
No, I don't know of one.
Nope. Don't think they
Anyway,
exist.
forget about the discount and all that type of thing. Look, the ideal situation, pay the damn broker his commission. If he's a good broker, and actually does work and has knowledge and keeps his eye on things. So I'm a believer in kind of old school, good, smart, diligent brokers, as opposed to using your computer for everything. Cheap because it looks cheap. It's not cheap.
Right. Okay, let's see. Here's a question. It says, if you could only mention one thing, it says, what is the most important thing that Matt learned from Doug? And the same question for Doug. What's the most important thing, or what has Doug learned from Matt? You don't have to answer Doug if you want to. I'll answer this. So I think the most important thing I've learned from you, two things. I'm gonna have to say two. The first one was that you taught me how to think properly. Not that I don't think, not that I always think properly now, but I didn't really have a good construct for even thinking properly when I started reading your work and got to finally met you and then got to know you better. And you did it fundamentally by shattering all the preconceived notions I had about the way the world actually worked. So you broke stuff that made, and then helped me start to understand how to think better. So people have asked me this before, and I say, you taught me how to think. The other thing is that I always thought, because I'm not a super educated person, so I always thought that things that happened in the past had very little bearing on my life. And, with the way that you dig up history and pull lessons from it into the now and able to basically see what the future might look like based upon your deep understanding of history has made me, where I used to think it didn't matter at all, now I find it profoundly important. And I enjoy it. I spend a lot of time trying to understand what happened in the past. So I'd say those are probably the big things.
Well, I appreciate that. And I'd like to think you're accurate in everything you said, except one thing. You said that you're not educated, foolishly, long time at conventional schools. So actually, it was wise to cut your losses early, and stupid on my part to have hung around for 4 years in college when I would have dumped that if I'd had good counsel, which I didn't have back in those days. But one thing that from hanging out with you is that you've always been an entrepreneur starting and running businesses. Now, I appreciate and I like businesses, entrepreneurial businesses, but a man's got to know his limitations. And as much as I appreciate them, it's not something that I'm wired to do, to deal with employees, to pay them the right amounts to. So, we each have our stronger points and our weaker points. And so any business that you start up, you can count on me as a backer, but let's put it that way.
I've always appreciated that. Okay, let's see. Doug, if you just started making money a couple of years ago and in 2022, we're still trying to grow it, how would you mentally balance your desire to grow your capital base while preparing for a recession or depression or even a dollar collapse? I mean, just goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Anything can happen now. If you're still in growth mode, trying to grow your capital base, how do you play it? How do you balance the risk and reward at this point?
Yeah, you hate to be you got people on Wall Street and in the economy, what you call perma-bulls. They're always bullish about everything. And of course, generally speaking, they're right. There's that old story about JP Morgan looks down Park Avenue with a young associate who's gloomy about things 100 years ago. And Morgan points to all the buildings and he says, you see those buildings? Bears didn't build those buildings. Bulls built those buildings. And he's right, of course. So within that context, I've got to be cautious. If everything collapses and the world order resets, as the bad guys say, well, what might be a really good idea right now might not be such a good idea in a couple of years when markets shift tremendously. So within the context of what Morgan said, there's some times when it's better to be more cautious than others. It's like, interest rates have gone down for 40 years, market's gone up for 40 years. Everybody's deeply in debt and artificially prosperous. I don't know, consider that. Just a thought.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think Nassim Taleb has this idea of that the first goal should be to avoid ruin. And, so I think that, and I like thinking of that concept a lot because, as I know, during the financial crisis, I got way over leveraged in gold futures, assuming, we're going to have a financial crisis. And of course, it's going to be good for gold because it's going to be a, rush to security or, something real. And ultimately that proved to be true. But first, gold got crushed, hammered. And I took a trade that had some upside for myself, but was a small part of my portfolio. And I kept meeting the margin calls, and to the point where it was now a massive portion of my total wealth was tied up in this trade. And if it had gone for 3 more days in the wrong way, I would have been financially ruined. And it was just totally idiotic for me to put myself in that position. And so since then, my number one goal has always been to never, ever, ever put myself and, have anything where I have exposure to ruin at all.
Yeah, exactly. Look out for the downside. I mean, that's really number one. I mean, just before we started the call, I was talking to my commodity broker, and this is a time of weakness. I've been very fortunate in my commodity trading, but I tend to act as an insurance company, selling options, not buying them. Because as I've said before, when you sell options, you don't have to be really right. You just have to not be very wrong. Whereas if you buy options, which is what most people do, you have to be you have to be very right in order to make money. But the problem with selling options is you're acting like a casino, the house, or you're acting like an insurance company, which is smart because they're the ones that do make money. But the only way you can do it effectively is by keeping your risks under control and being well diversified. If you're a casino, you don't want just one whale placing giant bets. You can break the bank. You want thousands of little fish placing tiny bets, and then the law of large numbers work for you. So, I closed out a couple losing trades for small losses, or small gains in one, but I just got out of them. I mean, I've become more and more risk averse the more I learn and the longer I live. So yeah, that's right. I agree. I don't know if that answers the question or not. That was kind of a soliloquy, but if it answered the question or not, really, I'm not sure.
Well, I think mentally balance it by the idea of just avoiding ruin. Like think through what the downsides could be, and just understand really what the downsides are. Like there's a lot of people who talk about like taking on more debt because interest rates are still low and things like that, trying to do things on margin. Those kinds of things are the things that seem like a great idea, doing things with leverage or on margin. They seem like a great idea in a bull market, but as soon as it swings against you, you get crushed. So
yeah, that's true. I mean, I bought since I sold the ranch in Aspen, I bought a place on the Chesapeake. So, okay, nice house. And I managed to bottom tick the interest rate market for a 30-year mortgage. Okay, well, that's debt. But on the other hand, I really don't give a damn. I can walk away from the house if it gets into,
right.
Just don't care.
And it's a small portion of your overall portfolio.
Exactly. It's not like, it's an important thing.
Right. Okay. Doug, someone asked, what's the best investment you've ever made?
Basically, if you really, unless you want it, look, I'll tell you the best investment I should have made. It's buying Berkshire Hathaway in like 1970 and forgetting totally about the investment markets. Like they don't exist, but every other nickel that I saved and earned, just put it in Berkshire and let it grow. And, that would have been smart. I wouldn't have had to clutter my mind up with, but on the other hand, nobody would have known that was true. The best investments I've made have all been, yeah, they've all been speculative, low price stocks that in retrospect, maybe I was crazy even getting into them. Like I got into Hive, which was the first publicly
Miner,
traded,
crypto
yeah,
miner.
crypto miner, right? And that worked out just really super, super good because I got in really cheap, really early. It was a sweetheart deal. I mean, another great deal was in the biggest mining fraud in history, Bre-X. The story was so good that I bought a bunch of it. I mean, at $1, and it later ran to what, 150 before it went to zero. But I got out, and Diamond Fields, got into that at $0.25 with a warrant. It ran to 240. I pretty much rode that to the top. I mean, my selling was good there. And what other stuff have I had? I've had some other recent stuff that's worked out pretty well. In fact, so much stuff for me recently has worked out well that I'm starting to think, wait a minute, I'm actually not that smart. I mean, I'm sitting on a farm here in Uruguay. I mean, it's not like I'm in the room, actually. So, I'm trying to tighten things up at this point. I really am. But anyway,
Okay.
had some good luck. But it's easier to make money in a bull market than a bear market. No question.
No question. No question.
The
Okay.
only possible bull market that I see out there are these crappy little mining stocks, which really are, relative to the underlying metals and this, they're really still cheap. And even little oil companies, still real cheap. But when the tsunami comes, even stuff that should go into another bubble, maybe it'll get washed away. I don't know. I mean, I wish I could say something with
Some certainty. No, well, seems very, very tenuous right now, so it's hard to know. Next question. Someone says they're thinking of moving to Colombia and buying an apartment. Next month, though, they have an election, and it looks like an ex-FARC communist may obtain power. But what are your thoughts on Colombia as a future place to live for a gringo?
Yeah. A lot of gringos like living in Colombia, in Cartagena or Medellin, especially, I guess. I like Colombia, but so many times that I've been there, especially outside of Medellin or Cali or Bogota, it can be a dangerous place. You remember that movie with Michael Douglas, Romancing the Stone?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you get out into the countryside there, people forget about the histories of some of these countries. And after World War II, I mean, it didn't start with the drug wars. I mean, they had a war between the conservatives and the liberals, and it was really nasty. Because what would happen is that the conservatives, so-called, would ride into town, and if you were a liberal, they'd kill you. And then, when the other guys rode into town, if you were still alive, you were obviously a conservative, so they'd kill you. The whole areas were depopulated, and there were hundreds of thousands of people. And then the drug wars started, and it got worse. And I don't know. It's unfortunately, it's just an unstable part of the world. And the problem with going to really unstable places to live is, yeah, it can be fun and it can be entertaining, but frankly, everybody's got families, especially in these, kind of, let's say, traditional parts of the world. Family is much more important there than it is in the United States or Canada.
Yep.
Where everybody splits off and the family is not as important as it is. And, grandmothers tell their daughters and sons, who tell their daughters and sons about these bad guys in XYZ party. and the hatred kind of breeds. It's like Hatfield and McCoy stuff.
Exactly.
So, I'm not so sure about Colombia.
Well, there's a lot of pressure just below the surface. A lot of people are living, just above the poverty line. They're often very densely populated areas. There's violence is not long in their past, but a lot of people are familiar with it, have been around it before. And you just imagine if there's stress on that system, it can unwind in the ways that are very difficult to imagine. And people imagine the U.S. any city in the U.S. going bad. Well, I think you could take certainly any city in Colombia, and the risk of that is far greater than it would be in the U.S.
Yeah, because there are a lot more people that are right on the ragged edge of going hungry, and yeah, a lot of problems. So maybe now, it isn't the time to think of Colombia. No.
Well, okay. Here's a kind of interesting question, Doug. If you had a sibling, let's say a brother, who wronged you in some way, and you didn't get along with them, would you still go to their funeral when they died out of a sense of obligation?
Well, was I ever close to the brother? I mean,
must not have been. Must.
Yeah.
If they wronged you, and then it sounds like you kind of excommunicated them, is what it sort of seems like the situation they're describing.
Yeah. I don't know. It might depend on what side of the bed I got up on that morning.
Yeah.
But this thing with families, I've long been a believer in the fact that the family you're born into is an accident of birth. So the fact that you share genes with other people, okay, all right, that's important. But wait a minute, my genes don't have any love for me. My body's just a survival machine for my genes. To hell with them. I mean, they're not my friends. I mean, they're parasites using me to stay alive. And this whole thing with blood relatives, okay, I understand the pluses and all that type of thing. But look, how I react to somebody, and I've got a long leash. I tend to give people more rein than I should most of the time. But generally, if I think a person's a bad character, my attitude is fuck them. I don't care who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. But I think that also it's, try not to let the petty things drive a wedge, because it's weird how that can happen in families too. Let little things.
Yeah, that's right.
Pile on.
Yeah, you don't want to start an inter-family feud because everybody sees you as being a bad guy for being disrespectful of tradition. And there's that too. Yes, of course. Oh, it's...
Yeah. Family problems, complicated problems. Okay.
Right.
What do you think that
families is almost as bad as dealing with the public? Like,
can be.
Yeah.
Can be. Let's see. What are your thoughts on the future of unions? Do you think that they will increase in the coming years?
Well, unions are a stupid idea. It's basically where, a bunch of people get together and, use their collective mass to shake down their employer with the shield of the government, making it hard to break them. So, people that are members of the union love the union because they know they're earning more than they would in a free market. So how are unions going to do? I could build an argument for their getting bigger again and washing away again. I'll go towards the latter.
Washing away.
Washing away. The world is deindustrializing. There's less kind of production line work. You're not going to unionize, entrepreneurs working out of their houses. It just doesn't lend itself to that. It's for mass production with masses of people. No, forget about unions. They serve no useful purpose. Good riddance.
Yeah. I mean, the power of like the UAW worker today compared to the way it was 30 years ago, it's just not in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Someone says, can you bring back Doug's friend, that European guy, the one from Monaco? We're talking about Kolya, I assume. And yes, we should definitely have Kolya back on the show at some point, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, you and I talked to him
Weekly now.
basically weekly. So yeah, he's a lot of fun. Yeah, we
Yeah,
can
he's
do
great. Okay. Let's see. He wants to know if you agree with his observation. His observation is that former Eastern Bloc countries, having been through totalitarianism, are much better at detecting these tendencies than Western Europe and the USA, which seems to me kind of naive. We could see this during the pandemic when in our countries, the lockdowns and mandates were also present, but much less enforced and much less followed by people. He says he's in the Czech Republic, but he's seen a similar situation in Poland. Do you agree with
Yeah.
that observation?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure, frankly, because maybe Eastern Europeans are less sensitive because they've been inured to this type of nonsense for so much longer. I have no real opinion on it,
Okay.
whether how much geography that way from that point of view.
Okay. Doug, what are your thoughts on professional regulatory bodies, such as for doctors and lawyers?
Well, if they're voluntary and market driven, I think it's fine because look, I don't believe in licensing of any type by the state. And if anybody wants to hang out a plaque and say that I'm a brain surgeon, come to me, well, that's fine. But you know,
Buyer
but
beware.
yeah, but the fact somebody got a license from some body, uh, that doesn't mean anything or protect you really either. So no, the market will solve the problem. Okay. Like when I had a knee operation 10 days ago, how did I find the surgeon that I used? Well, I asked around. Frankly, I didn't look at how many government bodies licensed him.
You didn't check. You didn't check his license. Jeez, Doug. How could you be safe?
You know,
How could you be sure?
for all I know, he doesn't even have a diploma. He didn't even have a diploma on the wall in his office. So maybe I was a little bit too cavalier.
Maybe, but it seems to have worked out well so far.
Yeah, exactly. So no, government licensing bodies are just vehicles for corruption, and forget about them. I mean, the market will solve the problem when you're looking for quality of any type. Whether it's, listen, Abraham Lincoln, who I despise on many levels, but he was an excellent lawyer. I don't think he never went to legal school. I don't think he had a license as a lawyer, but he was a good lawyer. It's like a lawyer, my cousin Vinny, okay, couldn't pass the bar really, but he was a great lawyer.
Exactly. Okay. Next question. Do you hunt in Uruguay, and if so, for what animals?
No, I don't hunt personally. I love guns, but no, I don't hunt. Now, if you wanted to hunt here, other than going down by the river here with your long knife and your dog and killing big pigs, wild boar, which our gaucho does, what else do you hunt in this country?
It's got to be some decent bird hunting.
Birds. I think birds.
Yeah. But other than pigs and birds, I don't know what else.
Well, I don't know of anything, frankly.
Yeah.
This isn't hunting country, really, to my knowledge.
Except for the pigs. They like hunting the pigs. Let's see. Doug, knowing the way the world is today and kind of your view of what will be happening over the next few years or decade even, what do you do over the course of the next 500 days to prepare?
I would say cut back your standard of living, save more, and put the excess in the right place. Physical goods, I think you can't get hurt. It's there was a friend of mine named John Pugsley. Some of the listeners here might have known John. Fantastic guy. He's one of my best friends. He wrote a couple of New York Times best-selling books, but one of them was called The Alpha Strategy. And basically, it was the first thing you ought to do is have stuff that you need. It's like if you buy a 5-year supply of light bulbs. Let's say light bulbs are going to double in price, but you don't have to pay capital gains on the double that you'd have to pay if you bought a stock and it went up so you could buy the light bulb double the price. So his strategy was first things first. And the first thing is things you actually need and use, buy them now, buy them in bulk so you get them cheaper. And they'll be there in case storages wake up and so forth. Maybe depends on the level at which you're playing the game, but you might use the alpha strategy. I'm sure that book is available on Amazon in the aftermarket. It's out of print.
Yeah, that's smart. I think that's a good thing. Someone who read Drug Lord says, forms this question this way. It says, quoting Drug Lord, quote, "There are essentially only 4 ways to deal with evil. You can bow to it and let it rule you. You can pretend it does not exist. You can try to run and hope it won't find you, or you can confront it and attack it. Only the last alternative has a chance of success for more than a moment." That's a quote from your book, Drug Lord. So he says,
I personally believe that.
Okay, so to put himself in the perspective of Putin, he says, have you ever observed a collective organism, Western culture, in nature that uses self-destruction as protection against attacks?
Well, I don't know. I guess this is. Do you think the questioner is putting Putin in the position of being the devil incarnate, which everybody is supposed to do today?
I think he's trying to suggest that Putin is taking the last approach, confronting evil and attacking it. I think that's what he's suggesting.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I think Putin overreached. You know, he doesn't want to conquer Ukraine. He just wanted to get rid of the Ukrainian army, which was attacking those 2 breakaway republics. And in effect, he was acting as the US likes to pretend that it does, helping a little guy, so that, God, what a tangled situation. What a mess this is in the Ukraine. I don't know.
Okay.
And anyway, like one group, I'm on a Zoom group every Friday with a bunch of guys, which I mentioned before. And one of the guys there says, well, we can't let Putin be a bully, because when a bully attacks you, you gotta smack him down and teach him a lesson, or otherwise a bully will keep on being a bully. But Putin's not being a bully. I think he's, I'm not saying he's a good guy. Nobody that runs a state is a good guy, frankly. But he's not doing this to act like a bully. And it's not because he's a little guy or any of this bullshit that you do.
Yeah, the psychoanalysis of him. Yes, I love that.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, next question. What do you think of the Gulf countries, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Oman, being the new bastions of freedom, much like the English Five Eyes countries were 80 years ago? Do you think that's true?
Yeah, well, no, I'm not sure that it is true. I mean, they're wealthy, and but they're there is Islamic countries. It's a different culture, different ideas of what constitutes freedom and what's important than we do. And I like hanging out in those countries. Frankly, high standards of living, approximately zero crime on the streets, place to run and hide. I don't know. I don't think you're ever going to fit into those societies, quite frankly. You'll always be just way too much of an outsider unless you decide to follow the prophet, which makes no sense to me. So
why do people think of them as bastions of freedom? Is it just because of their, their trade policies and their, the banking system and, low taxes? Is that what?
I think that's it. I mean, taxes are very low because they have outside sources of income. Okay. And the trade is free.
But certainly like freedom of speech is not something there you could do.
No, it's not. And of course, if you're a citizen, you're not supposed to gamble. But I'm trying to think, does Dubai have a casino that's available? I don't think it does for foreigners, but the foreigners, the non-Muslim could do that. And of course, the locals can't drink, but foreigners can in their hotels. So I don't know. I guess freedom's where you find it. I mean, I guess I could live there, but they're strange places because, like, most of the people that live in those Emirates aren't Qataris or UAE people, any of that. They're Pakistanis and Sri Lankans and Indians.
Bangladeshis, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They're people like that. Is that going to make it kind of an unstable place or not? I don't know. Look, it's one of those things. There's about 50 places in the world that are interesting and weird, but what are you going to say?
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Next question. Judging by the information being put out there, do you think Africa is facing a major famine, or is it just a sensational take on things?
Well, the main thing that Africa produces, or about the only thing it produces, is raw materials. Raw materials. Things like copper and gold and oil, and there's really basically no manufacturing in Africa. The other thing it produces is people that can't really support themselves. Africa is kind of a black hole for foreign aid, which is all basically stolen. I think I've said many times in the past, if I was 30 and wanted to make a fortune, and maybe things have changed just in the last 5 years or certainly 10 years. So it's a little bit different. Yeah, I'd go to Africa in a second for all kinds of reasons. But I think if the West collapses, if we really have trouble and we stop sending investments and aid and other types of capital to Africa, yeah, the population could actually collapse, I think. So,
well, there's just with the current issues with around wheat and other foodstuffs like that. There's a lot of price rises could dramatically affect things there and cause famine alone, right? I mean, wasn't it Egypt? It wasn't like 75% of their wheat came from Ukraine, something like that. And so that's just now off the market.
Yeah, although technically speaking, I don't think we should think of Egypt as part of Africa.
Yeah, understood. Yeah.
Yeah, but Africa south of the Sahara always had problems. And the population of sub-Saharan Africa has only grown, since with colonials coming in there. The Africans are supposed to hate the European colonials. Okay, I can understand a lot of reasons why that should be the case, because they didn't come in to trade so much, except for slaves, but to conquer. So that's not very nice. But on the other hand, Africa they would have gone nowhere if it hadn't been for, at least I think they would have gone nowhere if it hadn't been for Europeans bequesting these technologies to them. They're not developing integrated societies that, are actually producing real businesses and real scientists and real engineers or anything. I mean, it's all outside capital, outside management. Well, not all, but largely. Yeah, I think Africa could find itself in trouble. And what's going to happen when it really looks like it's in trouble is tens of millions of young Africans are going to say, "Oh, I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm going to Europe." So, it's Africa's in trouble, I think. We'll see.
Totally different question, Doug. What do you eat for breakfast?
Oh, well, I pretty well got that down to a science. I eat raw oats with blueberries, fresh blueberries, preferably. And they're simple, they're wholesome, they're low calorie, and doesn't take any aggravation to make them. And,
Good. Yeah. Okay. What do you think about buying coffee as a commodity?
Nothing that comes out of a box. I get, raw.
Good ones.
Coming out, those little cylinders.
Yeah.
And they're cheap. Not that I care about it being cheap, but they're virtuous. Oats are virtuous.
Okay. What do you think about buying coffee as a commodity versus investing in coffee farms or something like a REIT or an ETF in the coffee agricultural space?
Well, I got very interested in coffee some years ago when coffee was trading at $1 a pound. And it's trading at around $2.25 a pound right now. But even at $2.25, my understanding, and it's hard to get on the ground information as to what the actual costs of producing a pound of coffee are. I mean, what kind of coffee and where is it? What's the shipping cost? All kinds of stuff, especially with things like that are produced by small producers who, basically get ripped off by the
distributor or co-op. Yeah.
So, okay, so coffee at $2.25 per pound right now. I still don't think coffee growers are really making any money. And I don't think there are any big time coffee growers. It's small holders that sell. They're basically hand to mouth kind of farmers. I don't know how you get into the business or what you do about it, quite frankly. And I think, and I'll tell you something else I think. It's that I like to think of coffee because everybody tends to live in the past. Well, I remember when a cup of coffee was a nickel and you got a bottomless cup of coffee for a nickel. And there was a time like that in the United States, incidentally. There really was. Now a cup of coffee is $5 at Starbucks. So what am I trying to say here? I think like most commodities, the price of coffee has probably reset itself to rotate around $2 a pound as opposed to $1 a pound, which it was not so long ago. And so I look at coffee to speculate in, but do I want to go to East Africa like Isaac Denison did and get into the be able to say, once I had a farm in Africa and getting my coffee growing business. No, I really don't. That's not my thing. I mean, I got a cattle and soybean farm and a tree farm here in Uruguay. And you want to know how much interest I take in those commodities as a grower? Well, very, very little. It's just a pleasant backyard for me. So, no, I don't think there's any future. I don't know how you get into coffee and play with it. Start another Starbucks, maybe.
Okay. Do you think that gold may be revalued during the Great Reset?
Yeah, where's gold going? Right now, I think gold has been, and I've said this for quite a while, well over a year. Gold is like at a reasonable equilibrium, in my opinion. 1900, 2000, relative to everything else in the world. Other commodities, price of labor, it's kind of reasonable right now. So I can't be for gold, and I'm not bearish on gold. It's it's equilibrium. So how do you play it from here? That's the question. How do you want to play gold from here?
How do I want to play gold from here? Well, the way I play gold from here is gold stocks. The gold stocks I own. I have some physical gold that I've had for a while, but I haven't bought any new gold. I guess I did buy a little bit last year, but I haven't bought any new physical gold beyond that little bit I bought this year in a while.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much what I do. I mean, if I have some savings, I've got enough of it. I mean, how much do you need? But if I want to put some capital aside, yeah, I've got some more gold coins, but the bargains are in the gold stocks.
Okay.
Well, that's all.
Doug, what's your view on Lieberland?
Oh, I'm very friendly towards Lieberland. I wish it well on absolutely every level. Will it succeed? And how do we define success? Well, I don't know. What Lieberland needs is, well, I'm not sure what it needs. What it needs is probably somebody to take it under his wings that is well connected politically and worth 10 or 20 billion dollars. Being a billionaire isn't such a big deal anymore. And develop it and do all the things that you have to do to make sure that it's not reconquered. But who is it? Croatia and Serbia? It's on the Danube, I guess.
Yeah.
I've never physically been there. But support it. Get a passport, become a citizen. Good idea. It's kind of like showing the flag. It's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, Doug, if you were a young Viking at 1100 years ago, with the knowledge you have now, what would you seek to conquer?
Yeah. Well, what would I want to conquer things? Because, the Vikings listen, here's the deal. I hate to use that phrase because it turns out Biden uses it around. Everything corrupt. But, the Scandinavians were, Scandinavia is not the best place in the world to farm. And they were farmers. So they'd want a fisherman, knew how to make a boat, get the hell out of Scandinavia. But they made it as much by trading as anything else. But then again, when you find a soft target, well, you steal the gold and the women and go home. So what would I do if I was a Viking then? I wouldn't be harsh. I wouldn't be privy to any special knowledge. I guess I'd do what all the other Vikings did and go a Viking and see what's up that river and try to come home rich and famous. And what else do you do? What else do you do? It's not like you can go home and read a book or something like that. That wasn't a real possibility. You gotta do something so that when you go back to your hall and you're feasting and drinking and wenching, that you've got great stories to tell to your fellow warriors. So you got to go out and do that stuff. So I guess that's what we'd all do. You know?
Guess that's what we do.
Yeah.
Doug, why don't you create a Doug Casey development in Uruguay and develop your holdings into a village of like-minded libertarians?
I tried that in Argentina, and it was a financial disaster. I mean, sustainable, but it wasn't fun losing money. And but it's an artistic success. I've got to say what we did, no question about it. It's an artistic success, and the people that are there like it. But intentional communities almost never work. I mean, that was proven in the 1800s in the U.S. when there were a score of them. Like, I'm trying to remember all their names. Generally religious-based. People shared an ideology, a religious ideology. So I guess it still works today with the Amish.
Yeah, but they're like the exception to the rule, I think.
They are an exception to the rule, actually, because most of these things fall apart.
Within a couple of years, they usually collapse.
Yeah, and it's even worse when you're dealing with libertarians who are more like herding cats than almost any other group. So, hey, come to Uruguay, and if Matt and I like you, maybe we can hang out sometimes.
Exactly.
But conventional community, I don't think so. I've been there, done that.
I think intentional community is kind of a misnomer anyway. I think it can't really, it can only be built organically. It can't be defined in a top-down way and actually work. I mean, even though when you're doing a real estate development, now that's an intentional real estate development, but the community part of it could happen or not happen, depending upon what the economic and social or cultural ties are among the people who live there. And I think that you just try it. If you want to establish a community, it's just try and develop more economic, cultural, and social ties with like-minded people wherever you are. You don't have to go and build houses next to each other necessarily to make it happen.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree.
Okay, let's see. Doug's mentioned Ayn Rand and Neil Stephenson previously. Are there any other fiction writers that you really enjoy? And have you read any Cormac McCarthy novels?
Well, I did see the movie of Cormac McCarthy's book, The Road. Did you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we watched it together.
Oh, did we? Yes. Okay. It was pretty gloomy.
Yeah.
In fact, not just pretty gloomy, it was very gloomy.
Yeah. He did No Country for Old Men, I believe, also. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Did he? I did see that. That was pretty depressing too.
Yep.
I don't know. Listen, when it comes to science fiction, I really like Arthur C. Clarke's stuff. I like one book I recommend by him is oh God. It's terrible when I'm thinking of the book and what's the title of the book? It is called, and Heinlein too. I mean, Heinlein's in my view, it has an early period, a middle period, and a late period. But the best Heinlein books, let me start him, and maybe I can think of the other book. It's Heinlein's Glory Road. That's what I liked by Arthur C. Clarke. Wait a minute. Glory Road. No, Glory Road was the third Heinlein book, actually. The three Heinlein books I like are Stranger in a Strange Land. That's really good. And The Moon is a Harsh Mistress. That's excellent. And Glory Road is great, but it's the book I'm thinking of. Anyway, I like all of Arthur C. Clarke's books. His sci-fi books are great. And I'll give you another sci-fi book that's really cosmic, that it covers all the bases. This guy was a genius. It's Olaf Stapledon's book, The Last and First Men. And it's usually published with another book called Star Maker, which is also really good. It was written during the 1920s. So read those. And, but you know, this Chinese sci-fi writer, what is his name? Yichin Liu. He wrote the Three-Body Problem. It's an excellent book. So far, not philosophically challenging the way Heinlein's books tend to be, but that's a good recent one, I thought. And what was that one that you gave me, Matt, by the Dogs on the Moon?
I can't remember the name of it right now. It's not in front of me.
It was Prometheus.
Yeah,
Last
Prometheus
year.
word.
Heck, what's the name of that? It's well titled. But I just call it Dogs on the Moon. What the hell?
Yeah, it's basically was Doggies on the Moon is what it basically was. I'm looking it up to see if I can figure it out what it was, but yeah, that was kind of entertaining. That book was, I thought.
It was.
Travis Cochran was the author, so I believe. And let's see, what did he do? Why isn't it showing up? I found the author, but I can't find his books.
I mean, they're good titles, strange, but they're complex titles, which is why I can't remember them offhand.
I can't find him. This is the worst book conversation we've ever had, Doug. We can't remember anything. Oh, it was The Powers of the Earth was the first one. The Powers of the Earth.
That's a good title. Yeah.
And Causes of Separation. Those.
Okay.
And I thought they were pretty entertaining. I mean, you know.
Right. They were. It's about humans in the near future after having developed an anti-gravity technology that allows for cheap and fast transportation to and from the moon, colonizing it. So it's kind of like an updated version of The Moon is a Harsh Mistress.
Yeah. Yeah, they essentially set up a breakaway colony, but it's, you know, there's not rules or laws there because they hate the state. And ultimately, though, it comes to a head between Earth and the people that are living on the moon.
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
It is an anarcho-capitalist set of novels, and I think they're quite good. So I'd recommend them.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, The Powers of the Earth is the title of the first one, and Causes of Separation is book 2. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Doug, what do you think about the climate and solar cycles? This has come up a few times. People keep asking about it. You and I have talked a little bit about grand solar minimum. How big of an issue do you think these solar cycles are for the long-term, stabilization or stability of civilization? And do you have any thoughts on that? And I guess, where do you think that the current grand solar minimum will have any impact on anything?
Well, listen, what do I know except what I read? And of course, I've always been a science buff. I mean, my whole life, as well as a contrarian. So I think there's plenty of indication that's more likely we're going into a time of global coolness, not global warming at this point, which has some very interesting implications. So that's it in a nutshell, without getting into a whole discussion about CO2, which is a non-problem, and all kinds of other things.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Trying to get to questions we haven't answered already in one form or another. So this questioner seems very frustrated about the behavior of the gold and silver market over the last 18 months, saying many investors expected more from the precious metals given the strong underlying fundamentals. And they say, in Doug's history of commodity trading, can he think of a time when another commodity behaved stubbornly and didn't reflect the conviction of many of its investor base?
Well, look, in the past, the number of commodities have traded at negative numbers. I mean, in the relatively recent past, hogs have traded at negative numbers, and oil has traded at negative numbers. And you think that was metaphysically impossible, wouldn't you? Like interest rates at negative numbers, which actually is metaphysically impossible, quite frankly. That's an indirect method of taxation by these governments. Another market that would be like gold and silver, just, well, look, I accumulate gold, but I'm not really speculating in gold. I mean, I sell out of the money puts, which is a way of collecting premium because I'm bullish to neutral to bullish on it. I think silver is a much better speculative proposition, but it's really weak right now. So now's a good time to sell puts against it or buy silver if you want. But I don't know. Do I see anything that's like a runaway, waiting to explode kind of proposition in the markets? No, I don't. The best thing I can think of actually is that the bond markets and the stock markets are going to crash. So instead of looking at commodities, because most of these commodities, wheat, corn, soybeans, coffee, cocoa, sugar, everything. I mean, they're like at a new equilibrium level. So are they going higher? Well, yeah, maybe. But on the other hand, demand destruction and so forth. So
right.
I think if you want to make a bet, I think the best bet right now is that interest rates are going to keep going up and stocks are going to keep going down. I think those are the best bets that I see right now.
Okay.
What do you think?
Well, one of the things with the gold and silver stuff is people are very, they are frustrated that it hasn't moved more, but it wasn't that long ago that gold was $1,100, $1,200, and it wasn't long ago that was that price, and we had a big jump. So there's that, and then also
I mean, what do you want? I mean, it's almost double where the average gulak out there is earning 0.5% per year on his savings, if he's got any savings. More likely he's paying 18% on his debt, of which he's probably got a lot more of. So don't feel bad about something taking a few years to double like gold did.
Yeah. And the other thing is that it's not like, there was a significant period of time, if I recall, where uranium was selling for less than the cost of production. It wasn't just like, one down month where that happened in the oil markets, but it was over a pretty substantial duration, right? Where uranium was.
You're right. That was roughly about the year 2000 when uranium was selling for $12 a pound or something, and been there for a long time, and they were losing money. And then, what do you know? Within 4 or 5 or 6 years, I forget what year it went up to $140 a pound from like $11 a pound, all of a sudden out of nowhere. But you're right, uranium is a perfect example of that.
But in that case, it really was something like a real coiled spring, not because the investors wanted to see it go up, but because there was real market demand for it. And the producers were getting crushed and ground down for years and years, and there was no way it couldn't resolve itself. The question is whether or not what the timing would be. So it seems like these cycles can be really, they can go way speculative. Way manic on one side, and they can be totally in the dumps on the other. And a lot of times it's just you just have to you need a much longer time perspective to really understand these markets. I think we've been spoiled a little bit by. We've been spoiled a lot, I think, by crypto, because in Bitcoin you would see these long cycles actually that you'd see in the commodity market. But the problem or the difference is that they would be like 3 years. What might be 15 years in a commodity, you'd just see expressed in like 3 years with Bitcoin, and so you could the patterns made sense and you could see it play out. But again, it kind of spoils you, and you're not really looking for a 15-year cycle of things anymore.
Yeah, and there are anomalies out there all the time. Like, for instance, right now, natural gas, very important commodity in lots of ways, in Europe is selling for $30. In the US, it's trading for $6.50. And well, when is that market going to normalize? Well, I don't think European prices are as likely to go down as US prices are to go up, because this is a whole nother story. I hate to go long natural gas when, historically, natural gas in the US is sold for $1.50 or $2 or something like that. And now at $6.50, wow, it's pretty damn expensive. But maybe it's going to go to 30 and not come back anytime soon until production ramps up. But, the leftists don't want to see production of, these horrible carbon emitting things. It's all very, very interesting.
Yeah.
But make any actionable recommendations? Well, actually, I am starting to look at some natural gas companies to see if they're reasonably priced. That could be a good play. And incidentally, the one mention of a stock, I don't think we've mentioned many stocks here, is, what is it, Cryomass.
Cryomass, yep.
And it's trading at 50 cents now. It's been ticking up and up and up after a long time of just going nowhere. So who knows? Maybe these guys are going to actually do what they said they're going to do.
Yeah.
And everything else.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let me just get a couple more questions, Doug. I know we're going a little long. It says, in the last episode, the topic was touched of revolutions, and that mostly they were top-down organized, but sometimes it was a people's revolt, came from the bottom up. It says, you also lamented that nowadays people seem to be less dangerous than before for their overlords. We use Shanghai as an example. Question is, how can we be more dangerous again? Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, in that last novel that John Hunt and I did, Assassin, we start broaching how the people can be more dangerous to their rulers. And if we ever get the next one done, Terrorists, we're going to explore that in a lot more detail. But
not that you're endorsing anything, but there's some good fiction book you can read on some of the ideas around how you can handle this.
Yeah, exactly. Get a hold of that book and see if it gets you thinking, but not in a way that you do anything that's illegal, God forbid.
Hell no. Entertainment purposes only.
Right.
Yep. Okay. All right. Last question, Doug. It says, could Doug talk about carbon credits as an idea and an investment to include carbon royalties?
Got to relate to that earlier. Listen, carbon credits have been very, very good to me, but because look, it's a mania. It's a stupid mania, and a couple of different friends of mine that don't even really associate with each other have both put together carbon deals that have both been just really good. But I think it's a scam. I mean, it's completely ridiculous from beginning to end. But since that, what was it, a Paris conference or whatever, everybody's got to reduce carbon or offset carbon. It's all nonsensical, destructive bullshit. But some companies have taken advantage of it, and I have too. But you know what? They've done so well recently that enough is enough. And so, forget about it. I mean, when the world economy is in real trouble, lowering your carbon footprint for yuppies is about the last thing people are going to think about. So I think the game's almost over.
I think you're right. Okay, well, we'll leave it there for today, Doug. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, you too, Matt. This has been a lot of fun just rapping into the ether.
Yeah, it has. Thank you very much.